Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Charmed. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously, everyone's kind of got their issues in this episode, but I think it's interesting because it's mainly about actually Macy and Jordan. And this actually brought up something interesting where it's like, oh, Macy was like, I actually don't know that much about you. And it's like, right. Because like amongst everyone, like the one person that probably knows the most about him is probably Maggie, because she spent the most time with him. So it's not like Mel or Macy would know that much about him. But I'm also curious, how much does Maggie actually know about him? Because we as the audience don't know that much about Jordan. Other than him having been in the military, that's about it. We come to know his personality, but there's a lot about his background that we still didn't know. It is kind of interesting. He's like such a well-trusted friend and ally, but it's like, right, Macy was like, I actually don't know that much about you. Especially when a lot of his stuff comes up. But we'll get to that soon enough. Obviously, Macy and Harry were in the process of still translating the tablet. There was some stuff that's in demonic that they have to go to Abigail for, which I love that like Macy's like, no, I'm not going. I'd rather poke out one of my eyes. Actually, I'd rather poke out both of them than go see Abigail, because it's like no matter what happens, there's always something that turns around to Abigail. But it's like, yeah, maybe she won't help us because of the whole, well, you know, last time Mel was trying to kill her type of thing. But, you know, Harry goes off to handle that. Well, at the same time, Macy runs into Jordan, who's like, oh yeah, I'm meeting up with Macy. She's helping me. I'm meeting up with Maggie. She's helping me with something. And then all of a sudden they're attacked. Jordan jumps in the front of the attack, and they both get sucked into essentially a bag, which ends up being like this containment spell that basically traps you in your own memories, which Macy was irritated already just because Jordan kept asking if she was okay, because obviously she was kind of very short with him, but obviously she was kind of a little frustrated with the whole Harry thing. It's a whole Shay group thing like that from last episode. And obviously I like that it wasn't something that was completely dealt with. Of course, there's going to be lingering effects of it, but because of that, she's kind of irritated at Jordan, you know, because it's like, oh, like, you know, we wouldn't be in this situation if you hadn't jumped in front of him. He's like, I'm sorry, I tried to protect you, which is instinct, you know. But we're kind of having a trip down memory lane, because at first it's high school, and it's like, oh yeah, here's Trish, the girl, she was my everything in sophomore year until she cheated on me. And it's like, once again, like Macy, like, how do I not know so much about you? But I love that it's like, oh, there's like a locker. Side note, I don't know what it is. I like that cinematic view of like how like they went into that scene from the other side of the lock in the locker, and then it zooms out of the locker into like Macy staring at it. I mean, the lock staring at like Macy staring at it. I don't know, like I like that. I don't know what it was. I was like, oh, I like the effect there. It looks so trippy and crazy and warped. I don't know, like, I had to rewind it because I was like, oh, that looked actually pretty sick, like, from a cinematic point of view. I'm not the biggest, like, cinematic nerd. There are a lot of people who are cinematography nerds. I'll pick up on some stuff from time to time and be like, oh, that's actually, like, from a cinematic standpoint, I'm like, oh, that looks pretty sick. But that, regardless, we're going on a bit of a tangent, but I love like Jordan, like, you know, and Trish and everything, and she's like, oh, I need the $20, and I love Macy being like, wait, you're actually giving her the bucks? It's like fine, and it's like, oh, plus I wasn't going to need you to drive me and so because so and so's like still on drugs, like, yeah, we're telling her just drop the drugs, but you know, and Macy's like, really? It's like she had her moments, and it's like, oh, hey, where'd you get that key? Oh, yeah, some other old dude had it with the hat and stuff like that. It's like, oh, he's like, I mean, but would you really want to have that? I mean, because you're so original, having something that someone else would have. She's like, you're going to buy me something nice to replace it, right? And he's like, you bet I am. And I was like, I thought it was pretty smooth how he took it off, got it off of her. But I thought it was really interesting where Macy was kind of like, don't you ever get angry? It's like, come on, how long were you dating her? Too long. And, God, what was the other question? Oh, like, why didn't you realize you deserve better? He's like, water off a duck's back. She's like, what, don't you ever get angry? He's like, yeah, when someone punches me in the face when I'm trying to teach them how to fight. She's like, oh, well, she's like, that was the one time. Besides, I was doing that to steal your ring so we could see if you were evil. And he's like, I was like, right, I forgot about that. Good times. But the next memory is not as somewhat of a fond memory, but it turns out to be, his last the last place he was in Afghanistan, and his translator Mateen getting killed, because apparently, like, you know, and it's sad too when Jordan's like talking to him, because Mateen's like, oh, thank you for getting my green card, but that mission is the mission he died on, you know. And that's, I think that's one of, I mean, who knows what else is in his time in Afghanistan that doesn't sit well with him, but it seems like that in particular is probably one of his biggest regrets, because he said it's because of me, because I guess because he went on that mission, Mateen went with him, or maybe it's like they were such a good pair that he was like, Mateen was like, no, if you're going, I'm going. So like maybe Jordan just blames himself in that regard. I was actually surprised. I was thinking that that's where we're going to spend the entire time, but there was like a third section to it, so I was actually surprised by that. But when they were just kind of walking away and trailing after his ancestor, who's the one that the witch finder general, who kind of started this whole curse in the first place, as they were traveling down that path, I thought it was really interesting where it's like, you know, Macy starts telling him, it's like, don't you ever get angry? He's like, oh, you want me to get angry? And it's like, because a lot of what she's feeling, Jordan can understand, because he's in a very similar circumstance, because it's like, you're in our, you know, once again, they'll always go back to that line from Gus, Edgar from The Boys of, oh, getting angry, like, having a fit in public is a white man's privilege or something like that. I'm butchering the line, but that's me paraphrasing it. It's kind of something like that, where it's like, you're supposed to be perfect, you're supposed to be exceptional, because it's the thing of, you're not allowed to have outbursts, you're not allowed to be angry, you're not allowed to smash things. She's like, I don't want you to do that. I just want you to know it's okay that you feel that way, that you shouldn't feel bad that that's like a natural, because it's natural for anyone under those circumstances to feel that way, but you're kind of told you got to be better, you can't, because you'll be looked at a certain way, because, oh, you fly off the handle, it's like, oh, you're going to look like angry black person. It becomes that type of stereotype. So I can get like, but the thing is, like, you know, it's like, but for Macy, it's like, that's too much of a burden to be holding on to too much anger. And for him, it's like, yeah, for the both of us, because I think for Macy to hear that was like, right, that's kind of what's been eating her alive too. And I thought it was pretty neat, him confronting his ancestor, obviously protecting the witch. She was like, please help me, save me, Jordan, and this will kind of break your curse. But rather than killing his ancestor, he stopped. And she's like, why? Like, you know, but for him, it's like, violence begets more violence. Like, the fact is, I can't change the past, but doing this won't do anything. It's like, because for him, it's like, yes, he's mad at his ancestor, because so many of that ancestor's descendants, and obviously other ancestors of so many people, so many young men in Jordan's family died at 26 because of what he did, because of his mistake. They had to suffer for it, which even he's like, it's unfair that I have to pay the price for something I wasn't a part of, you know? And he kind of tells the witch that, like, I get what you did. I completely understand what you did. It was out of desperation, but, you know, for him, handling things his own way, you know, for him not, like, you know, not turning to violence, like him finding a way on his own, for him, like, that's how I'm going to balance the scales, and not just, I just thought that was such an interesting development. And she whispered in his ear, and it turns out she actually freed him from the curse. What I actually think is actually pretty dope is, and I like this when you get like characters that never really interact too much, getting them to get buddied, and it's like, oh, like, it's like, because obviously like Jordan and her had that back and forth, and it's like, are we friends now? Yeah, I think we're friends now. I like that. Yeah, I like that these characters who haven't spent a lot of time together got to spend time together. I thought that was pretty nice. But also, it is a situation of, it's nice to have someone to talk to who you don't have to explain things to, who completely understands, like, oh, I've been through that myself. I know like the whole rigmarole of like how that whole thing works. So I thought that was kind of neat. Plus, also, it's like, oh, he's no longer cursed, so they're able to hug. But for him, it's like, yeah, it might not be cursed anymore, but the struggle continues, like their circumstances, you know. So, well, I mean, in the sense of like, the allergy thing, but I mean, it doesn't affect his part to play and all that. But I mean specifically their particular struggle, like Macy and Jordan's, about, you know, their complexion and everything. So I think this is going to probably lead to some interesting stuff going forward with the Shea group. Like, obviously, I'm sure we're going to see more with that going forward. I'm just curious to see what that will kind of turn out to be. But other than that, we find out who, like, you know, on the Mel and Maggie's side of things, we find out who the intruder was. Turns out to be, hey, so I'm your cousin Josefina. I'm like, wait, what? I was like, okay, so that's interesting. Well, they're second cousin, but she's like, oh, you want to think of me as your first cousin? Cool, that's fine too. But I was trying to think, and do correct me in the comments down below, I don't think the Charmed Ones ever met any extended family. I think the closest thing to that, and it's not even extended, but obviously it's family they don't know about, was Paige. I think that's the only other, like I said, to be fair, I have not seen this show in its entirety in years. It's been over a decade since I've seen this show in its entirety, because I watched the show, most of the show in high school. It's when I started watching it, and when I also, because it ended while I was in high school. Yeah. So, like, at least my freshman year, but I started binging and watching it a lot more like my sophomore year and stuff like that. Regardless, tangents and all that. But I don't remember a lot of family member stuff, because it's always just been the three sisters, technically four, but obviously with Paige, three Hollowell sisters. It was mainly just them for the rest of the show, so it's like, except for when they like bring in Billy, that's about it. That was more so someone they took in, not that they were blood related. So it's just interesting to know. And also this introduced the aspect of the story of like, and I think it's so interesting because last episode they were dealing with a witch family that basically went two separate ways. And it turns out Josefina is here because she wants to get the Book of Shadows because it actually belongs to her family, because their mom apparently stole it and bounced. But they're like, no, our mom got a college scholarship and that's why she came here. And it's like, no, she left so much family behind in Puerto Rico. But obviously, it gets Maggie thinking like, our mom hid so much from us. It's like us being witches, binding our powers. Let's not forget about the whole you have a half-sister situation. Oh, also that Maggie and Macy are full siblings and not half-siblings, that Mel and Maggie are actually the half-siblings. And also Macy and Mel. But you get what I'm saying. So many secrets in that front. So it's like, what else is our mom keeping from us? Because the whole thing is like, why would she kind of not tell us about the rest of her family and just never have us interact? It's like, well, maybe she had a good reason. Maybe. I don't know. That's definitely going to be interesting to find out on that front. Like, what was that about? Like I said, I don't think that was ever a thing in the original show. Because if it was, I feel like that would have been a continuous thing. Because I feel like this is a storyline. I mean, it might just be a season 3 thing, but I feel like this is a storyline element that could go for a long time. Like, there could be ripple effects from this later on. But I thought it was so interesting. And I actually thought it was kind of sad, Josefina's story of, like, her family was, like, super down for the whole, like, oh, transitioning thing, sure, we support you. But it's like, right, being a witch is, like, a woman thing. So it's that thing of, like, oh, because you transition, yeah, you're a woman, but it's with quotes around it. So the power of a witch, which I'm trying to think, like, are there not warlocks in this continuity? In this show? Because there were warlocks in the original show, if I remember correctly. So, like, there were male witches, right? They've come across warlocks in this, have they? I'm actually blanking. Like, once again, correct me in the comments down below, but I just thought that was interesting. Or maybe in this series, it is only witches. Maybe there are no warlocks. Because every time they've ever come across anyone, it has always been a witch. I mean, because, like I said, in the original show, I think they came across witches and warlocks. If I'm not mistaken, most of the warlocks... Well, yeah. Oh, yeah, there definitely were warlocks. Because I remember there's a skull later on in the original show that had... I wonder will they do that storyline for this as well. The school for, like, the... Because obviously they go to school, but it's a human school and everything, and they're teaching and participating in it like Maggie. But I'm like, I wonder, are they going to, like, do the magical school line storyline, or will that just be something for the original show? It'd be kind of interesting to see what they would do with that now, modern day, and also like just what that would do, what that would be like in this Charmed series. Regardless, I just thought that was interesting. But Josefina hasn't come to her powers yet because her family's telling her it's not going to happen. So a lot of magic. Interestingly enough, she was self-taught. But she's only got the more potion side of things because she doesn't actually have the power to. So I didn't talk about it. That Mel and Maggie combo was sick. Josefina threw that, like, Mel stopped it with her powers. Maggie slid and, like, hit her with the baton and tripped her. I was like, yo, that was a nice 1-2 punch, dude. That was sick, Maggie. Holy shit. Like, the slide and, like, knock her off her feet. That was pretty dope. But obviously, I love that whole thing of like, oh, I can't get them out of the spell. I mean, the only way it would get like this if one of them was cursed. I was like, oh, cool, lucky for Jordan. It'd be, and also begs the question. I'm assuming Mel would probably be dealing. Well, I keep doing that sometimes when I start talking too fast. I mix up their names. Macy when I'm curious what Macy would have gone through under the normal circumstances, because the spell became unstable because you were dealing with Jordan, who was cursed. So it's interesting how that all, it's just like, oh, lucky Jordan, his instinct to kind of step in. I mean, I think he would have gotten sucked in eventually too. Whether or not he got in front of him, it would have been more so Macy's if she had gotten sucked in first. But I think because he went in first, he basically dictated the container. I think, the memories they got stuck in. But working together, because she uses Bruja. It's kind of something that, it's from a Western standpoint, it might be viewed upon as like dark magic, but for her, it's like, no, that's just like colonization made it kind of looked at it in a negative light, but it's the basis behind magic in the West as well, so it's the same thing. So at the end of the day, doing what they could do as the charm ones, that's just Mel and Maggie, wasn't enough, but combining with what Josefina knows, they were able to keep it, the container going, the spell going long enough before it completely melted down to give Macy and Jordan time to get out. So they just kind of worked out on that front. I do appreciate that Josefina's like, oh, I'm going to go back home and prove my family wrong. It's like, hey, but you can stay here if you want to, until we can find a way to get your power. It's like, oh, I don't want to be annoying. I'm like, hey, more people in the house, hell yeah. But that's also part of me wondering, is like, well, that's kind of what happened with Billy. Like, Billy, once again, not a biological family thing, but became like family. They took Billy in and kind of taught her everything they knew, so it'd be kind of interesting. Which is not like they're the most well-versed witches. They've only been at this for a while, too, so it's interesting. I'd still consider them, well, I think they're experts at it at this point in time, because they were trying to tell Josefina, it's like, Macy's not too pissed. We've literally been through this too much. It's kind of part of our everyday lives, so you kind of get used to it. Kind of the sad part. But nevertheless, on the other side of things, you have Harry and Abigail. Obviously, him going to Abigail, and she's like, oh, you want this drink or whatnot? And it's like, no. I think it's still there, like, regardless of anything. It's like, oh. Because I think at first, because she later on throws it in his face that, like, Abigail's like, oh, everything you're going to do, you're going to go back and be with Macy. Everything you're doing is just for Macy, and then you're just going to... For her, she felt a little slighted, because it's like, oh, yeah, you come to me for help whenever you need to, but yet, there you go, running back to Macy's arms. Because she still has a thing for Harry, because I don't think that's ever been completely resolved, because, yeah, she chose... Harry chose Macy, but I think there's a part of her that's still like, I can win him over. I think so. Like, whether it's the good in Harry or whether there's the bad that's there within him that brings out, or whether it's the good in him that brings out the good in her. Like, she feels like he compliments her well, that he makes her want to be a better person. So I think it might be, are you in love with Harry? Or are you in love with who he makes you become and who you make you feel like, So I think that's kind of the big distinction that has to be kind of considered. But they go visit Fenric the Vile, a demon who tried to kill the previous, a demon lord centuries and centuries ago, to try and take over the underworld, the demon world. But got locked away for it. So they go and visit, and he's super chill. I'm blanking on his character's name, but it's home dude from the Lodge, from Lodge 49. I was like, hey! And he's a pretty, because of everything going on, he's kind of, at least from where I was in the show, I only got a couple episodes in. I need to circle back to, I only got a couple episodes in the season 1. I was really enjoying it. I just needed to take time to circle back to it. But I love that at his show, he's kind of a very chill character. And so it's interesting that he's this, demonic, crazy, be wary of this dude. And it's all of a sudden he shows up, he's pretty chill. Until the moment he grabs their heads and oh, what are you guys really here for? To find out their true motives. But he's super zen, and it's like, oh, I'll help you out and everything. Well, I say zen, but he's relaxed. He's not zen. Because saying zen, I guess zen might be the right word. Because I'm almost thinking like Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon Randy. I was Randy, Jesus. Oh, God. Danny Rand. That's what I was trying to say. I said Randy. Jesus. It reminds me of very super chillaxed Danny. That's kind of more zen, but regardless, they end up finding out that, because obviously Abigail's super suspicious, because it's he's just, for one of the most feared people to be locked away here and everything, it's there's something up here, something's not right. And obviously Harry thinks she's just looking for a shortcut. Rather than doing the hard work of becoming a better person, you want to find a shortcut to it. But they find out it's like an amulet that basically numbs you. You don't fall, like, you lose all your emotions and just become purely logical. You're more a robot. And they kind of test it out. And they're logically trying to, like, figure things out. And he's like, oh, you found the amulet. Yeah, it's a nifty trick. You know, it does wonders, does miraculous work that can never be done before. So now because of this, Harry, I'll give you this translation I got you, but I need you to kill Abigail so I can become the new overlord. It's like the reason why he won't do it is because if he does it, the demon world is going to frown upon it. So, but it's like, oh, this way you do this for me and I become the overlord. I can teach the demons to kind of be more peaceful like myself, so you don't have to worry about it anymore. Because Harry was logically thinking like, no, I have to keep Abigail alive because she, you know, maintains a lot of peace between the magical world and the demon world. But then he kept trying to push Harry to do it, and even Abigail being like, no, this is the best way to handle it. If it means also getting rid of my demon side, you know, it'll be me dying, sure, but it kind of all works out. That's her thinking about it logically. And I thought it was so interesting that even though he was thinking logically, I was wondering if some form of emotion was still there, but it seems like it was still his logical explanation of, no, I'm not going to do it because, you know, despite you being that the amulet taking away your emotions, you're still the vile person you are because you're still aiming for you want me to kill Abigail. But the fact is that you're willing to do that even without your emotions. It shows that even quote unquote peaceful demons, what would you eventually convince them to do later on down the road? Because for him, it's like emotions with no logic is dangerous, but logic with no emotions might be way worse. So, got the translation, and it's like, oh, we're not going to kill you. We're just going to leave you as you are, and he bounced. Doubt that's the last we've seen of Fenric. There might be more to that later on. We'll kind of have to wait and see. But obviously, like, the taking of your emotions was only temporary, so after a couple hours, they're back. But then, like, I love that, like, it's like, oh, thanks for this. And as Harry's trying to get in the elevator, she keeps blocking him every time. But he says, like, remember, like, there's no shortcuts to, like, this. You have to do the hard work. Because, like, once again, is it because you really have a thing for Harry? Which I think she does, but there is an element of, you also make me a better person. So he's kind of her shortcut. So I think that was him being like, don't rely on me to be your shortcut. Like, don't rely on me just being around for you to be a better person. Just be a better person in general. So interested to see where things kind of go with Abigail. And the thing is, it's like they make an interesting pair. That's the thing of, like, you wanted Macy and Harry to get together the entirety of season 2, but it's still just kind of a thing of, it's a little bit naughty that you're like, oh. Also makes you wonder, like, who Abigail will end up with, like, at the end of, I mean, not like she needed anybody, but it's still the thing of, like, oh, like, I'd still, once again, the conversation was, what about Mel? And I'm like, honestly, I ain't mad at that. I really, like, that had gotten suggested, and I'm like, I didn't really see it before, but the more time they spent together, I was like, honestly, I really see it now. Like, it's not until someone pointed it, like, I'm guessing if you go back and kind of, you could probably pick up on some of that, but I don't know if that's like just a, you know, a shipping that most people might be behind, or whether it's just like, I don't know. Either way, it just like people think, oh, they'd be cute together, or maybe it's just certain aspects between them has shown that there is something there. Because I think they could, because they dislike each other so much. I mean, once again, next to Mel, the only other person that dislikes Abigail that much, I don't even think Maggie hates her that much. I would say it's Macy, but I think it's also because of the Harry angle. I think Mel's more so disappointed because she believes in Abigail. She realizes what kind of a good person Abigail can be, and she's just disappointed every time Abigail falls back into old habits. But that's why I'm kind of like, if they end up going down there, which I know kind of sucks because it'd be like, oh, but what about Ruby and Mel? It's like, yeah, but I don't know, man. I'm selfish. I'm like, honestly, I'm kind of feeling Mel and Abigail. I would not be mad if that ended up becoming a thing. You never know, right? Things could shift that way. I mean, that's the thing. Relationships are never, like, there are some relationships it's like, oh, that's just meant to be, it's going to be. But there are some, you know, I feel like Macy and Harry are here to stay. We'll see if there'll be some wrenches thrown in, a big wrench thrown in a relationship with this allergy situation. Regardless. Aside from all of that, you know, I did like, you know, at the end of the day, Harry was like, I'm sorry about before. don't understand, and I never will understand. I can never understand what it's like, what you had to deal with with the Shea group. The fact is, I can't walk a mile in your shoes, and it's not right for me to try and push you for an answer of something I can never understand. You know, as a white male, it's like that's just something he can never understand. Her walking in her particular shoes, because he was so desperate for an answer. Because for him, it's like anytime he feels kind of like. He's desperate to do whatever he can to understand her so he can help her, because if he's not able to help her, it's that thing of like, yeah, when someone you care about is going through something, and you want to be able to be there and support them. But for him, it's like, I want her to talk about it so I can support her. But it's like, no, it's a situation of just understanding that you can never understand it is, you know, the understanding aspect to it. So I thought that was a pretty neat element to it. Still the rough thing of like, you know, obviously the allergy and everything still interfering with, you know, other aspects of everything, but can't even touch each other. But at the end though, they used the tablet, and well, they said what they had translated before in Latin plus what got translated in demon, and all of a sudden at first I was like, oh, are we getting biblical? Are we going to start raining frogs? It's like, nope, it's scorpions. Which there's still the whole story between the scorpions and the frog. Not unless it's because I think scorpions are still biblical, isn't it? It's just interesting. It's like, oh, what did we do? We released chaos, and it's like, did you like open a portal to like the tomb or something? Well, the prison, like, or what? Like, what did you do necessarily to make it literally start raining? So, are we going to see like more biblical stuff kind of come up, you know, in the next episode? Probably. I mean, I guess like maybe like all this stuff that's going down, like the tomb and everything, is supposed to be kind of maybe like the opposite to the pit. Like it might be kind of similar to like Lucifer's. No, this is actually the example I used before, like when those seals and stuff first popped up. I used the example of Supernatural. Like there's basically 666 seals on Lucifer's cage. You basically need to break 66 for him to get out, and that's basically the plot of season 4 of Supernatural. No, it's actually, yeah, that's the entire plot of season 4 of Supernatural. So I was wondering if it was something like that, and maybe that's the same thing, and maybe this is kind of like supposed to be like a prison alarm going off by being like, oh, it's raining scorpions, shit's hit the fan, like the first barrier has been removed or something like that. I don't know. That tablet might end up being more bad than good. Maybe not. Still, a lot needs to be answered about where all this is going to take us. You know, still monsters, allergies, tomb, so many questions. We'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Yosefina picked a crazy time to show up now. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.